And I remember working with Maria Bamford in Adelaide in the early 2000s. Do you know Maria Bamford, who's what's my favorite joke of hers? If I was going to have plastic surgery, the part of my body I'd like to have removed is the part of my brain that gives a fuck about what other people think. I just adored her. I wanted to be her, but I couldn't be her.
That was amazing, by the way. Thank you for sharing
thanks.
So the impressions, is this going to be a new part of the upcoming tour? Impressions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely going for accents. I'm from Dorset.
Hey, kia ora team. Today's episode is brought to you by Mr. Vintage. Mr. Vintage is New Zealand's most iconic t-shirt brand. Doesn't matter if it's a local pop cultural phenomenon, a sporting event, or even a New Zealand personality, there's every chance that Mr. Vintage has made a t-shirt for them and some product for it. Kiwi owned since 2004, selling Kiwiana t-shirts and gifts online. There's even a range of king sizes for us bigger fellas. Today, Mr. Vintage and us want to give you an extra special. How about 20% off any men's t-shirt? All you need to do is go to mrvintage.co.nz. In the checkout, use the promo code FUNNY, FUNNY, and you will get 20% off any men's t-shirt. Head to mrvintage.co.nz, enter the promo code FUNNY at checkout for 20% off any men's t-shirt.
You're in Dunedin now, right?
Yeah. I've been here since 2014, man. It's been forever.
I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah, I came down end of 2014, December 2014.
Yeah.
So that's coming up 9 years. I guess next year I've been here for 10 years.
Yeah. Bloody
it's
hell.
Forever. I know, it's a long time.
Yeah. Dunedin's great. It's
good
city.
Yeah, I love it. I love it to bits. I've always said to people, like, I'm not one of these people, like how ex-smokers are the worst people in the world. And they're like, because they're like, smoking is terrible for you. You don't need to do it. People who leave Auckland are like that as well. Fuck Auckland. It's the worst place. That's not me. I like coming back to Auckland. I like Auckland. I've always said I could imagine being back in Auckland. I just don't have any desire or any reason to come back. But if the right opportunity presented itself at the right time, I'd happily come back to Auckland. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, great.
Whereas Wellington can go fuck itself. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I left Wellington because it had shit weather. And now it turns out Auckland's got shit weather and Wellington's terrific.
Yeah, well, as we record this podcast, it won't be up for a few weeks, but as we record it, you guys are storm number 3 on the way?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a little bit nervous about this one. We were away for the big flood. We flew out of Auckland Airport on the day of the flood. Like I was being hilarious as we were arriving, at the airport, Auckland Airport, Friday morning, looking out the window going, guys, I hope our plane takes off before the tarmac's flooded.
Crumbs.
And that's what happened. But we got out.
I think some of the most shocking footage I saw from that event in Auckland was the airport being flooded.
Yeah, it's weird.
Like kind of ankle deep, shin deep water through the whole international airport. Because I'm still not entirely clear. Maybe it's the both of. I'm not entirely sure whether the water came up from the ground for that one or whether it came from the sea and overflooded. But whatever, that was like, I mean, it's funny. I always think about an analogy as to what's happening to me today versus what might happen to me. And I think about airports because I think about how often I go to the airport and I put someone onto a plane. And then there's that occasion where you go to the airport and you get onto the plane and I walk through the gates and I go, so this is what they were experiencing when I dropped them off,
Yeah.
And the floods are like that. It's like we see this all around the world, but I've never seen it in New Zealand. Not to be arrogant and say it can't happen here, obviously, but it was one of those moments going, this doesn't happen here. This happens other places, but it's happened here. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Hey, well, look, thanks for joining me so much today, Michelle. I enjoy speaking to you. In fact, I've spoken to you. I feel like my connection to you was sort of through your husband, like an
Yes.
interpersonal kind of level. That I'd done a lot of stuff with Jeremy for quite a long time, way back to theatre sports days. But I feel quite lucky that I've spoken to you quite a few times in the last wee while, including over Christmas, where I got to talk to you on a radio station about your New Year's honour. And even though we've kind of talked about it, I guess I wanted to say congratulations again. And I'm wondering, how has the tiara turned up in the post? Has it actually arrived yet?
No, but luckily I already own a couple of tiaras of my own, so I've been able to just dust those off. I don't know if I've said this to you before, but it has involved less curtsying than I was hoping for. People aren't curtsying nearly as much as I expected. No, it's lovely. It still feels like this tremendous gift, really. I quite enjoyed it before anybody knew, because I kept it a really good secret for about 3 months, October. And that was like, I don't know if this makes sense, but for me, it was like being a little kid walking around with a very, precious little stone in your pocket that you're not gonna show anybody, but you know you've got it.
Nice. That's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
as you're saying that, I'm thinking about each time I was with my former partner and we were pregnant. It was that, you have that kind of 4 months of not telling anybody. It's a nice moment,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, a good secret is a really lovely thing to keep. I like it, and, there are a couple of moments, I was, just before Christmas, I did a gig that I did not enjoy because they still happen, in, Kirikiriroa in Hamilton. It was, they were just drunk. They were just, like, several hundred people, very drunk, not there for comedy, there to just get drunk, and there was a man who was, this is what he said to me, and it's hard to know how to be supportive when somebody says that kind of thing to you. And then he kept taking photographs of my bum and showing me on his phone and saying, "I promise I won't post it on." So it was just, anyway, it was disgusting. And all I could think was, the thing that stopped me from feeling really yuck about it was, you don't know this, buddy, but I've had a letter from the Governor General, and the King said yes, and it just cheered me right up. So
Was it
yeah,
was it the king? I'm just thinking, because that would have been,
yeah, it
because
was the
October
King.
would have been quite close to that transition because of the passing, wouldn't it?
Uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah, so I'm the first batch of honours from the King.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah, so you get the email saying, "We'd like to offer you this honour. Would you accept it if we did?" And you get to say yes or no, and then they say, "Great, and now we're just gonna run it past the King
Ooh.
and see what he says." And there's
And
I
and
mean,
he goes
I
to
did spend a
YouTube and
bit
he
of
goes,
time.
"Stand-up comedian, what have they ever said about me or my mum or, my
What have I said about him?
ex-divorce?"
What is he gonna say? And I do have this really lovely, vision of, there's a moment where he's sitting at his desk with his sausage fingers and finding a pen that doesn't leak, and there's a list of names, and he's going, "Michele A'Court, what does she do? Something charitable? Let's have a look. Oh, stand-up comedy. Do ladies do that?" So, yeah, I like that idea that he saw my name and had to go, "Yes, tick."
Do you reckon that's what actually
Yeah.
happens? Because, I mean, so many underlings, but is it the kind of thing that because it's an award, like an honor, it has to be ticked by the king, like he has to sign something or something?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Wow.
there's probably a very proper. I watch The Crown. I feel like I know exactly how the royal system works. I think there's a proper system, so names are cited and things will be signed
Right,
off. I
yeah.
mean, I'm sure he pays no attention to it whatsoever. I'm pretty sure he didn't Google me, but
Let's hope not.
but yeah. Can I tell you one fabulous thing? Speaking of googling people, um, one of the greatest things that's come out of it for me is that I now have a Wikipedia page,
Ah.
because there's this amazing group of women. They're called, what are they called? Turn Red Blue. You know how if you search somebody on Wiki and they don't have their own page, but they're mentioned in another page, their
Yeah,
name appears
yeah,
in red.
gotcha.
So what these women do is, they're New Zealand-based women, I believe, and they, the night before the honours are announced, they all get together and they get once the things are announced, they all check through all the women who receive honours, And if they don't have a Wikipedia page yet, they create them
Wow, that's so
in
cool.
like a matter of hours. And so they were announced on the 31st of December. By the end of that day, I had a Wikipedia page I didn't have one before, and it's full and it's correct, it's accurate, it knows more about me than I do. And it's just these women saying, because apparently, 19% of the people with pages on Wikipedia are women. Women are way in the minority, and so they're just making sure that women are represented in that sort of public information space. So thank you to them. What a bunch of good sorts.
Why is that? I mean, like, I don't want, I mean, that sounds like a dumb question, but, I don't like the answer. The patriarchy, like, I'd either delve a bit deeper. Why would only it be 19% of women? Like, because if someone's
Yeah.
got profile, like, I've got
Uh-huh.
a Wikipedia page. I don't know who did it when. I was an
No.
overnight announcer on a radio station, like a nothing job, bottom of the totem pole in the media world. And someone made a Wikipedia page about me, and it's still there today. And I don't suspect it's been updated for the past 10 years. But why do you think that would be, that women would be less represented on Wikipedia?
Because it's how do I explain that without just saying the patriarchy? But it is the
You can
patriarchy.
say that.
Well, it is. I mean, that's what it is. Like, men pay attention to men, promote men. Um, that's who gets the attention. That's who has the loudest voice in the room. Maybe the people who spend a lot of time making Wikipedia pages are men. I don't want to say sitting in their mum's
Maybe,
basement, but
yeah.
I think I just
Yeah.
said that. I'm sorry.
Taking photos of bums or female comedians, those kind of people.
Maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they're busy, writing about their heroes, the people who impress
Yeah.
them. And women are, holding down full-time jobs and raising children and doing all the emotional labor. And like, I heard an interview with a woman who is part of the international movement of women making sure that women have Wikipedia pages. And I wish I had prepared this, but she's a scientist, and every day she goes home from her job. I don't know what
Of
she does. She
science. She's
does
sciencing. Of sciencing.
sciencey
Yeah.
shit. She does a shitload of sciencing, and then she goes home and she lives by herself and doesn't have a family. And so every day she goes home from work and she writes a wiki page about a female scientist.
Wow.
So she finds somebody from history or current times and does all the research and puts together a Wikipedia page, which obviously gets updated and added to and enriched and nourished by other people. But every day she goes home and makes a page for a woman in science who has not been recognized yet.
I guess, I mean, I'm going to sound really naive now, Michelle. It's just it's like, you get into your own echo chamber, and sometimes that's a bad thing because you don't hear external words. But like my echo chamber, I think about someone with profile, be they male or female, getting exposure on Wikipedia. It doesn't seem to me to be, why would there be a difference? Like, because that's foreign to me. Like, I
Right.
have boarders in my house, and I had a boarder turn up the other day, a potential boarder, and she's got a Māori first name, and she goes, "Oh yeah, a lot of people don't invite us to talk to him because I've got a Māori first name." I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, I don't live in this world where someone with
Yeah.
a Māori first name would be discriminated against purely based on their name. This kid, early 20s, I'm getting old. This kid is like full-time student, full-time worker, working in the health industry, so she can go back to her Hawke's Bay home to look after Māori health initiatives, and an amazing human being, and can't get past the door in some places because she's got a Māori first name. It's just,
Uh-huh.
I know it's there. I'm not being naive saying it's not there, but I don't get it. It's not part of my world. It's so bizarre.
You're not listening to a lot of talkback, are you, mate?
Well, not so much anymore, although I did some over summer.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. And, we do live in worlds where we don't see how other people are discriminated against because it doesn't affect us. But so my daughter's Māori, and obviously so are my moko. I've got 2 grandchildren. And I can remember times when my daughter was younger and she was looking for a flat. And if she went by herself, she wouldn't
her chances of getting the flat were less than if me, nice middle-aged white lady, turned up with her.
Right.
And I watched that happen. You see, she comes around the corner and you see the landlord, and then I turn up and there's a different response. Or if she goes by herself and then I come the second time, she'll go, he was really different to me this time. And you go, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
Do you think we all have that a version of a perspective of bias in us? Do we all discriminate on some level? Like, you're an enlightened person, Michelle. I hear you on Radio New Zealand and I listen carefully to the words you say. Do you ever look at yourself and go, where's my bias? What's my discrimination? Do you know what it is?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, no, I do. I think about it a lot. I have a lot of privilege, because I'm white and I'm middle class, and I was going to say middle aged. I think I'm just heading down the other side of that now. But a lot of things are easier for me. A lot of things are easier for me too because I have a modicum of profile.
Yeah.
So people are nice to me, or sometimes they're not nice to me, but. But I have all kinds of advantages that I try to be aware of, and the point of being aware of your privilege is to use it to boost other people's voices and make them heard. So I quite often, particularly now that I'm getting older, I think that my role is to create spaces for other people rather than just trying to make a space for myself. Like when I walk into a room that doesn't usually have a woman in it, what I'm hoping is that even when I leave that room, that I will have left a woman-shaped space in it for other women to walk into. That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I like the conversation around privilege, and I like having it because so many people are like, no, fucking woke hard. But it's like, I always think of it really simply. And this is how I describe it. I mean, you can correct me or you can expand on it. I talk about privilege. Like, I own a house now. And one of the reasons I own a house is because my dad had the ability to lend me money for a deposit for my first house way back in the day. So I look at that as a privilege. And when people are like, well, it's not privilege, you've worked hard. I'm going, yeah, I've worked hard to keep the house I've got. But it was pure luck that I got the first house because of the situation I was in. So I describe it as something I didn't earn, that I don't deserve, that I benefit from.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of think about it. Like, I didn't earn my father's hard work to get to a position. I don't deserve it. It's not like it's an entitlement that I'm, in society I'm supposed to get, but I benefit from it. So that's how I kind of think of what privilege is. Do you think, does it sound right to you, or is there can you
That's a
expand
really
on
good
that?
definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that was given to you not because of what you did, but because of who you are, and it's because of society has, I think, a kind of default human to it, and the more you are like the default human, the easier things come to you, the more likely you fit into spaces. So if you're able-bodied and healthy, and you are white and male and all of those things, it's going to be easier for you than if you're not some of those things.
Yeah. And I like the conversation around white privilege, because so many people are like, "Oh, white privilege is not a real thing," and all you got to do is go, "Well, this criteria I put through, I didn't earn it. Like, that's up to my Celtic parents. I didn't earn that. Earn being white. I don't deserve it. It's not something that's owed to me." And all you got to do is look at, for example, the justice system to see how people of Caucasian origins get treated differently in that system. So I'm getting a benefit from it that others don't get. So it's really easy to unpack and explore when you look at it in that sort of way. Well, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
It's a pretty light-hearted conversation we're having so far about comedy.
Chatty.
Hey, I think I've told you this before, but my first memory of you was the final of the Rugby World Cup in 1987. And I remember you because it was a Saturday morning, I think, or a Sunday morning, and I was watching What Now? And you were wearing a French rugby jersey. And I remember that to this day. And I think you were with Simon Barnett at the time, probably, wearing an
87.
all black jersey.
87 was probably Frank Flash and Danny Watson.
Maybe it was Danny Watson wearing an All Blacks jersey, and you were wearing a French jersey.
Yep.
And then you kind of said, "Oh, my surname," and you explained. And I was going to ask you one thing about that, because I know lots of people who know you very well, other comedians, that sort of thing, who are in your world. And there are lots of people who still pronounce your name differently to one another. A'Court, A'Court. How do you actually pronounce it? And the origins of that based around your French history. Is there actually a French connection, or is it just like my surname, my mother's maiden name was Mulligan, so I've obviously got that Irish thing going on, but it's a few generations back. Tell me about your surname and the pronunciation of it correctly, so all those people who are saying it differently can get educated today.
It's A'Court, like acorn, but with a T.
So you do the T at the end, A'Court. All right.
Yeah, A'Court. Yeah. So it's very anglicized. It is originally French, apparently. Huguenot refugees in the 16th century, 17th century, from France to England. So 300 years in. Where are they from? Dorset. They're from Dorset. And then I had this great grandfather, Zechariah A'Court, who at the age of something like 14 left Dorset and went, I'm just going to say that all the time, just going to throw that in random, Dorset. He left Dorset and he went on a ship he went off looking for gold. He was like the fourth son. There was not enough money for 4 sons. So off he went. He caught a ship. I make it sound like a bus. He got on a ship, slowly probably. Oh my God. And he went to California looking for gold.
Wow.
And then he went to Melbourne looking for gold. And he got married in Melbourne and came by ship to Ross on the west coast of New Zealand, Aotearoa, and drowned about a year later in a fishing accident. And the guy he went fishing with married his wife. That's all I can tell you. You can fill in the rest, I think. So that was Zacchaeus. He was known either as Zacchaeus or Zechariah, and amazing dude, right? Like I often think that it's very cool to be descended from somebody who had the kind of courage that would have taken.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking purely about the on the boat, though. That triangle from the UK to America to Australia. That's probably some of the most dangerous in that age. Dangerous trips you could take.
Yeah, and I like that. I like it that, and I have other people who came before me who obviously got on boats and came here, and I really, that's on my dad's side, obviously Zechariah A'Court. On my mother's side, my great grandparents came from Oldham in Lancashire. It's not a Lancashire accent. I'm not, just stop it, Michelle. Anyway, they came here, and so they left in 1913 and arrived here in 1914, knowing they could never go back. Like they came here to help establish the Salvation Army in New Zealand, and they came here knowing that they would never go back to England.
Wow.
They would never see those relatives again. This was not just a once in a lifetime opportunity. It was you could only sell up and buy tickets and go to the other side of the world one time. And you were also going to a country that you hadn't seen on television because there was no TV. You hadn't really seen photographs.
Yeah.
They knew lithographs they had been shown lithographs of New Zealand, and they involve palm trees and women in grass skirts.
Oh my goodness! So they'll come in to speak to the natives.
Yeah. Well, I think they were coming to do Sally work with other settlers.
Yep.
But they arrived in Wellington in the teeth of a howling gale, and I don't think this is as tropical as we were promised. But they were really good people. They were socialists, as well as Salvation Army officers, and I'm really proud of the work that they worked. They had the deal was they had regular prayer meetings at their house, but basically that was about inviting people who didn't have food to come and have food.
Nice.
Yeah,
the Sallies are amazing. I was talking to someone just the other day about how the church kind of works in Western countries today, and that when you see a church group doing it well, like the Salvation Army, then everyone in society loves them. because they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is getting out and, for want of a less kind of Bible phrasey type word, looking after the widows and orphans. It's what they do. It's like they're driven to serve people, which is sort of the whole premise of it. And then you get examples of all these other kind of churchy type groups who then just they yell it from the pulpit, but they don't get out there and serve the people like the Sallys do. And I think that's the best example. Like growing up in the Catholic Church, watching the Sallys and what they do, like you guys have the understanding of what it means to serve people and look after people, and whether it's through their, is it called the Bridge, their drug and alcohol rehab, or whether it's through their shops providing low income products, or whether it's through their food banks. They're one of the groups that are really doing it and using, I guess, their religious beliefs as the cornerstone for why they do it.
Yeah, it's about serving. I'm not a Salvation Army member because it stopped with my grandmother, who divorced her Salvation Army husband for infidelity and got. This is a long, tedious story, but the Salvation Army part kind of stopped before I was born. But you're right that the Sally and I still, they're my favourite of the
got a soft spot.
People, very soft spot. And there's some gorgeous stories, like even though my grandmother was kind of excommunicated, she and then we lived in Levin, and the Sallys knew, so that all happened in the early 50s. In the 60s and 70s and 80s, Christmas time, Salvation Army truck in Levin would come around to our house and stop outside our gate and play many Salvation Army hits, because the devil doesn't have all the good music, the Salvation Army's got some of it too. And I thought that the Sallys stopped outside everybody's house, but they stopped outside our house in particular because they knew that's where my grandmother came for Christmas each year.
Nice.
And when she moved to Whanganui later, the truck came to her house there.
Wow.
And yeah. So, can I just say, the Sallys are not without, they did some really shitty things about homosexuality, and, they were on the wrong side of history in some of those things, but they're about service. And that's the thing I like about them, as opposed to so many other organized religions that are about proselytizing rather than service.
Do as I say, not as I do. So
this is really good comedy chat, mate.
It is. I know, because there's nothing like laughing at the church. And I'm allowed to, because I grew up Catholic. You see, it's like I'm allowed to make jokes about fat people. So that's although that's getting less and less and less as I lose more and more.
You're going to stop being allowed to. You're not going to be allowed to do that very soon.
I know.
I think even now.
No. So let's talk about that. I mean, I normally start off with asking when people were funny, but I do have a question for you about making jokes and about within the comedy realm. Is there stuff you're not allowed to joke about? I mean, is there things that it's not okay to joke about, or is everything on the table? It just depends how you joke about it.
Yeah, I think everything's on the table. I think it's how you joke about it. I think it's about who is the butt of the jokes. A joke takes the piss out of somebody.
Yeah.
And if you're punching up, cool. If you're punching down, no. And the example I always think of is when I first started out, I didn't do stand-up, I did character comedy, and I did a show. I was living in Queenstown, and I did a show with a bunch of women called Exposed, which toured around New Zealand. And we wrote a sketch about rape. So if somebody says you can't make jokes about rape, well, you can. If it depends what the joke is.
Yeah.
It's not the topic that's the problem, it's what the joke is. So I get really weirded out when people say, oh, comedy, you're not allowed to say things. You are.
Yeah.
You're allowed to say anything you like. But the audiences will let you know if that's acceptable, and you have to back it. Consequences, that's all. There are consequences to what you make jokes about. I mean, I would prefer that Rickey Gervais didn't. I would very much prefer that he didn't. Could probably stop the sentence there. Do anti-trans jokes. What the fuck? Like, why make jokes that take the piss out of people who are already struggling to have their place honoured and respected in the world. Why would you do that? Why don't you make, I mean, there's a long list of other people that you can make jokes about. Oh, I made myself quite angry.
I am interested in the concept of punching down, because I remember, speaking of Rickey Gervais, because he obviously makes you so mad, let's talk about him. He made a joke about Caitlyn Jenner's driving at one of the Golden Globes, and it wasn't necessarily about her gender identity or her transgenderism or anything like that. It was about her driving, and the debate then flowed after that was this person worth $100 million is not necessarily someone who's being oppressed very much. Is there a line there? Because she seems to be someone of incredible wealth and power. So is a joke towards Caitlyn Jenner about her driving, is that still considered punching down because it's about a transgender person? Or how does that, in your opinion, how does that sort of marry out?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because part of what I'm want to respond to is that Caitlyn Jenner is representing transgender people,
Yep.
right? She, for a lot of people, might be the only one they've ever heard of.
Yeah.
And so you make any kind of joke about her. Why are you picking Caitlyn Jenner for a start to make a driving joke? Is it really about driving, or is it because she's a handy catch-all for trans people?
Just to expand on it, I mean, I'm not defending his joke, but I've heard his explanation. His explanation was he was actually making a joke about her being a woman driver. Now you can say, why are you making a joke about a woman driver? And his response was that actually he would make a joke about women driving, and he made a joke about her as a woman driver. So he was actually, his joke, and from his point, was looking at her being a woman. No, look, I'm not. Don't pull a face at me saying whatever. But I'm just saying, is that the limits of to where you can and can't joke about when you say transgender jokes? Does that mean nothing, or can you still have an angle then when you're not necessarily punching down?
I feel like Rickey Gervais was deliberately trying to cover himself with glory.
Okay.
But, the irony of, but I just think of her as a woman, and I'm just going to make a sexist joke, and the person I'm going to choose to be the butt of that is going to be a woman. And, is she transgender? I didn't realize that was important. What a dick. He's selling you a piece of bullshit. Does that mean that you can't ever put Caitlyn Jenner in a joke? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't, but because I think she comes with a whole bunch of layers of stuff, and if she is going to be the only transgender person represented, then I don't know.
Has it changed? Let's look back. Like, I think about often when I speak to comedians, especially maybe of our era, not that I'm a comedian, but of our age, our era, they look back to things like Delirious by Eddie Murphy being a kind of like a quintessential young childhood memory that drove them towards stand-up comedy. That doesn't seem to be one of those ones that you look back on now and the jokes haven't aged well, but Eddie Murphy doesn't seem to have been held accountable, my words, for those jokes where others have. So what he said on stage back then around, like, for example, the gay community, there's some horrific jokes around the gay community in that stand-up routine. So in other words, have these things always been happening on stage that are inappropriate and this is just a new iteration of it? Or have we become more evolved to understand that this is not okay today? And I also wonder why Eddie Murphy hasn't been, I hate the word cancelled, I'm not saying that, I don't really believe in it, but he hasn't really been, whereas you look at like a Kevin Hart who said some things in the early 2000s and lost kind of got called out for the Oscars. For some reason, there seems to be this little ring around that Eddie Murphy, maybe because it is such a quintessential stand-up comedy that he's kind of been given a bit of a pass on that. But has this thing, like the Rickey Gervais thing, always been happening? Or are we more enlightened now to see it happening in real time and we don't have to look back and go, oh, that didn't age well? We can see right now that it's not aging well.
I don't think any comedy ages well. Is my answer to that. Billy T. James comedy doesn't age well at all. I'm old enough to remember Dave Allen, and this is 1960s television, Wheel Tappers and Shunters Social Club, and my wife's so fat, when she sits around the house, she sits around the house. Yeah. Les Dawson. Sorry, I did that. I don't know why I did that. That was awful. Cut that out. So no comedy ages well. It's all representative of the zeitgeist and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable today. And yeah, so I can't answer why Eddie Murphy has attracted less opprobrium
But
than
that's
Kevin
right, isn't it?
Hart.
There's no really anyone who's ever really called him out, like publicly in a big way. And if that is the case, if no comedy ages well, why is anyone held accountable for what they said 20 or 30 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, I have thoughts about if somebody said something dreadful 20 or 30 years ago and you say, you said something dreadful 20 or 30 years ago, and they go, yeah, fuck, I did. And I would never say that
Yeah.
again. So how you doing? I mean, I did some shitty, I remember doing some gags in the 90s and that I would never do now. Using, back when something was gay,
Yeah.
and I think a couple of times on stage I might have gone, oh, don't be ridiculous, that's gay.
Yeah.
And that's horrible. I'm sorry that I brought it up. Makes me feel yuck. It's not, yeah. And I would never do that now. So, I mean, you evolve, right? I don't know. I mean, obviously, social media has made the noise much louder
Yeah.
about what people did. Somebody threw a tweet. Somebody took a screenshot of a tweet that I sent in 2010
Ooh.
and posted. No. Well, I mean, I'm not ashamed of it. It was a tweet that said, I wrote a tweet about the Auckland Mayor, calling him, I just said, is Mayor Code Brown trending yet in New Zealand? Hashtag Code Brown. It's a terrible tweet. It was just about poo on the beaches. I find poo jokes amusing. And somebody accused me of being a violent bully.
My goodness.
And to prove that I have always been a violent bully, they had a screenshot of a tweet that I sent in 2010 where John Key had said on the radio, me and the All Blacks, we're quite mates. And I had written that in the tweet and said, yeah, John Key, I think you're quite dick. Again, it's not a terrific tweet, but I do not think it's violent bullying. So, yeah, I mean, everything that we say is now somewhere on the internet, right? And we are going to have to learn to forgive each other, not just comedians. We're going to have to forgive 17-year-olds for what they post on TikTok. In 20 years' time, we're going to have to go, you were 17.
It is.
What do you do
There's
now?
a lot of this stuff going on at the moment in society that we're in a transitional period as to what we do with language, and I think a lot of the conversations around gender is that as well. What does this word mean? Well, we don't know yet because we're in a transitional period, and when we get to the end of that period, we'll have more of a definition of what this word means. It's like I talk about Mount Egmont, Mount Taranaki. Like there was a transitional period where it was getting called both. And it meant different things to different people. And then we got to the end of it, and pretty much everyone calls it Mount Taranaki now. And we have a
I know.
definition for it.
I find it really cool that I heard somebody say Mount Egmont the other day, and I went, "What the fuck are you? Where is that? Where is that?" Oh, I grew up, the first probably 40 years of my life, just down the road from a place called Mount Egmont, and now I've forgotten. It's like if you were out for dinner now and somebody at the next table lit a cigarette, you'd be like, "What
Yeah.
going on?" So we evolve, isn't that great?
Yeah.
We evolve really quickly.
I think that idea of holding people accountable for what they said in the past, we're in that transitional, we haven't figured it out yet. And like I mentioned Kevin Hart once already, as you described, someone saying something stupid, then going, it was stupid, moving on, is sort of what he did do. But we haven't quite got to the point yet where society then goes, oh, that's okay because he's apologized. We're not there yet, but we're in that.
No, we're not.
We're in that movement, and it'll be fascinating to see where we get to and where we end up being. But I think so many of those debates around, what does this word mean? What does that word mean? It's like, well, we're in a transitional stage. And I often use, like you've mentioned the word gay, but the word gay at one stage meant happy people, nothing else. And then it started meaning same-sex relationships. And now if you use the word gay, it pretty much only means same-sex relationships or within an LGBT community. That's been a transitional period from a word meaning one thing to a word meaning another thing. And within that period, people would have been arguing about, no, it means this, no, it means this. We're in that period right now with a bunch of words. We'll get to the end of it, and then as a society we'll have decided, and things will be clearer. So, cool your jets. Cool your jets on all these conversations.
It's all going to be all right. And can I also say, I know Kevin Hart, we'll stop talking about him any minute now, but he didn't get to host the Oscars, right? He's doing fine. He's still working. He's still a multimillionaire. I'm not saying that it can't have been a bad couple of weeks for him, but he still exists.
Yeah.
He's still got a career. I get really frustrated when people go, "Oh, they're being cancelled," and you go, J.K. Rowling's still writing TV series.
I think people talking about being cancelled is I think it's a bullshit. It's like people were talking about being PC and now they're talking about being woke. They're all just buzzwords that don't actually mean anything. And I agree with you. I guess the only reason we brought up Kevin Hart is because we're talking to comedians. But I also,
and it's because he's short. It's because he's short, isn't it, Pat? That's what you're doing with that. That's why you looked at me. You went, "Oh,
yeah, that'll be it. That'll be
right."
it. Hey, when did you know you were funny? When did you finally in your head kind of go, oh, I can make people laugh?
Oh, I would have been a tiny, tiny child. So, because I grew up in like I was, talking about the Salvation Army people. So, the Sallies, they were all musicians because they all played, the euphonium.
Brass.
And hilarious instrument. And my grandmother was a singer, and my mother was an actor. My great uncle Frank was the world's greatest raconteur. And so storytelling and making people laugh was probably the most valuable thing you could do in my family. And so, if you wanted to impress people in my family, you didn't bake a cake or mow the lawns, you made them laugh.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, I mean, you might want to bake a cake as well.
That's fun. That's a really interesting thought. What if you wanted to impress your family? I know what mine was. Mine was like hit a golf ball, like a sporting thing. And like I can actually remember, I was more of an adult, but I can remember not very many times that my dad's been like whoa towards me. But I can remember standing at my sister's house out in Mangawhai, on a cliff and hitting golf balls off down to their property, and like having dad be like, "It's my boy."
Yeah.
And so, it's so your family was like, here's more value for you because you're making us laugh. And then
can you contribute to this conversation by saying something amusing? And so my grandmother and I ended up being the family double act at Christmas and birthdays and whatever. She would say a thing, I'd say a thing. She'd say, "Oh, whoa." And we had a very similar sense of humor. And then on the other side of my family, weirdly, my dad's younger brother, Trevor, who's still alive, we have an identical, really dicky sense of humor. And when we get together, it's like a little sitcom.
Right.
Which, I think other people are kind of, but we have very good time together and just this totally in sync sense of humor. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Did that then flow on into school? Was it like you were like under 10 sort of thing, and it flow into school? And did you feel power in making people laugh at school?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And because of that, I got cast in plays. Like the first play I was in was at primary school. I can't remember what it's called, but I played the smallest footman. I mean, it became very clear. I would have been like 6, and I wanted to be cast as the princess.
Right.
Because I don't know if you know this, but I'm a girl, and that's what we do. But I was cast as the smallest footman, and my first line was, "Why has His Majesty got his foot wrapped up in a duster?"
Right.
And it was a kind of Emperor's New Clothes thing. I'm not going to explain the plot, but it was hilarious, and I made everybody laugh. And I went, yes, this is what I do now. This is my thing.
How did that then lead into stand-up comedy? Like, because I mean, we've talked about the television presenting. Obviously, that was a path for you very early on. Were you already doing stand-up and stuff then? Were you moving down the acting, presenting
Stand-up
path?
didn't exist in New Zealand, Pat.
Yeah,
Then
the 1940s.
Yeah, come on. 50s even, not there yet. There was no stand-up here. I mean, there was character stuff. There was obviously Billy T. James and John Clark,
So like light entertainment,
Fred Gagg.
more light entertainment,
Yeah.
more skits, more that kind of.
Sketches, yeah, and fantastic stuff. You know, I grew up watching Back House on television, and Fred Gagg was like God in our house.
Yeah.
We all knew all the words to all the songs and many of the sketches. But there wasn't any stand-up. I remember seeing stand-up for the very first time on television, and I didn't know what it was called, but it was the Carol Burnett Show, and it was all sketch comedy with Lionel I don't know. Great show, and I loved her, and she wasn't pretty. She was hugely attractive, but not but like Lucille Ball, not pretty,
Not an Insta
not
model,
the
not a 80s version of an Insta model.
not a Charlie's fucking angel,
Yeah,
mate.
yeah.
She was an actual human. And in the Carol Burnett Show, she would at one point in the show walk out on stage, no costume, no makeup, no funny teeth. There'd be a stool and a microphone, and she would talk to the audience. They would ask her questions, and she would say hilarious things. And I watched that and went, "That's what I want to do."
How old were you?
when I do
What was it?
that.
How old were you in that moment?
I would have been 10.
Now, Carol Burnett played the bad woman in Annie. Is that the right same person? Carol Burnett? You know, the person in charge of the orphanage? Pretty sure it was, wasn't it?
Does she? In Matilda?
No, in the original Annie in the 80s. Annie.
I don't know.
Yeah, all right.
I don't know. I only know her from that show.
Yeah.
You are quite possibly right, but no, I only know her from that show.
So you were at intermediate school, early college at this sort of
It was
age?
at primary
school?
It was at primary school. And then, and I did theatre. My mother was an actor, so I thought that was what that all seemed very normal.
Yep.
Did school lunchtime concerts, did debating, public speaking, blah, 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 but constantly being cast as not the lead female, the ingenue, I was never the princess. I was always the smallest footman. And then I did drama at Victoria University with David Carnegie and Phil Mann. And again, always auditioned for the queen or and I was always I was bottom, or I was.
And you're always the footman, the version of.
Always. I was always the little comic actor. I was always the one that walked on and made everybody laugh.
So tell us about your first stand-up gig. How did it happen?
So after What Now, which was all, sketch comedy, then I moved to Queenstown, did Expose, which was again sketch comedy, character, monologue stuff. And then I got pregnant and thought, I don't want to drive to Invercargill to give birth. I'm going to move to Auckland. It's a very shorthand way of explaining what happened there. And I had met Facial DBX and Andrew Kovacevic and knew that Kitty O'Brien's had a once a month comedy gig on a Thursday. And so I turned up, I was pregnant, and I was doing character stuff mostly. And then one day I just, it was when we were doing A Bit After 10, which was a 1993 television comedy competition.
Yeah.
And I had auditioned as my character, Alison Thrust. I know. She did cooking and sexual health. Okay, and
so that sounds like a character that you've traveled on in real life, or through your writings and opinions all the way through, and podcasts, perhaps.
It is a little bit.
Yeah.
I had another character that I did on Video Dispatch called Eva Brick. I've had a time. It's been a great life, thanks. And then on the day of the semi-final, the final of A Bit After 10, I thought, I don't want to put the wig on and I don't want to play the character. I'm going to do 5 minutes about, my baby must have been born by then. I'm going to do 5 minutes about how weird breastfeeding is. And I did that and won the competition that night. Came second in the end. It was, anyway.
Patriarchy.
But, no, it was a dude, and he shaved his head,
That'll
and it was a phone and vote, and he had more mates than me, and blah blah blah. Where is he now? I don't know. He's an accountant, and Yeah, so that was probably my first stand-up gig, walking out just as me in my own clothes with my own voice, telling my own story.
So
Yeah.
you weren't pushed into it. You just made a decision you were going to go up and do it, and
Loved it.
yeah.
Hungry for it.
And then what about after that?
Yeah.
I mean, how does the transition go from that first gig to, I mean, I know that here in New Zealand, all our stand-ups do other things, but, basically
Yeah.
full-time professional stand-up comedian. How does that happen?
I kept being harassed by the fabulous Paul Horan to turn up for Kitty O'Brien's gig. So that was, and having that one person who believed that I could do it was really helpful. And then, yeah, I just started doing festival shows, ultra super vixen women with really enormous tits in 1995 with Jack Tweedy and Emma Lang.
Right.
And then I did some touring with Mike King in New Zealand and Australia. But I parlayed, because then I became a single parent,
Mhm.
and I parlayed what I was doing with stand-up into corporate events. Initially doing, so this is in the 90s, doing after dinner speeches. Oh my God, sometimes it was just so horrible. Like you were totally the wrong person in the wrong room. And corporate gigs are different from comedy gigs because they didn't buy a ticket to see
Yeah.
you. They came to have dinner.
Yeah.
And there you are, either delighting or offending, sometimes both. And sometimes it just felt like your bum was on fire. It was just horrible. But sometimes it worked. And the money was great. Like I was getting $40 for a comedy gig, and I was getting maybe sometimes $1,000.
That's pretty good money in the
maybe
90s.
800.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That bought a lot of, cheese singles for the kids' lunch. So
Yeah, minimum wage. I just did this last night as part of another show I do. I think minimum wage in the 90s was about $300 a week. So $1,000 for one gig's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. So that was, yeah. So, and then parlayed later, and I kept doing stand-up, doing a lot of corporate stuff as well. And it's the same stuff. You're just getting paid differently.
Yeah.
And then I, in the early 2000s, discovered that I was really good at emceeing businessy, corporate-y things, because I love making the audience feel comfortable. I love making the next speaker feel comfortable. I love running a Q&A. I love pretending that I know shit about shit. It's hilarious to me.
Four bullet points will get you through a whole night, won't it? That's all you need. 4 bullet points with information.
Yeah, just a lot of yes, indeed. And yeah, I still do a lot of that because it pays the bills, but also I really genuinely enjoy it. And I have, it's one of those interesting things to me I was told, don't be too much of a feminist, don't be too much of a left winger, don't be too much of a loudmouth, don't blah, 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 blah. And they're all the things now that people employ me for.
Yeah, totally.
It's like I'm constantly facilitating, emceeing, chairing events for women in leadership or young women learning. It's going back to the New Year honor. The bio that they write is basically a list of all the things I was told not to do. She started a union. She threatened a strike. She talks about feminism all the time. She's a loud-mouthed left winger. That's all that stuff that I wasn't. Was everybody said, "Don't do that. You'll be unemployable." Well, that's why the king's given me a bow.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm.
Perfect, eh? Who are you at your core, do you think? Because you do all these things, you wear all these hats. Are you a stand-up at your core? Like if you were to be able, if your CV only had space for one thing, one skill, one job, is your core of what is it stand-up and that feeds these other things? Or is it entertainer, or is it presenter, or is it, let's not get mushy, but like mum, who are you at your core in your professional life?
That's really hard because I think there's two things. I write down on, arrival cards on planes, writer, performer. Sometimes I write performer, writer, performer stroke writer, writer stroke performer. The two things I love are being in a room attempting to entertain people and being by myself, writing, putting on a piece of paper or a screen.
That's interesting because they're like polar opposites, aren't they? They're like solace, my time, my head, and this is all in here versus all out there. They are literally the opposite of each other. So does that mean you are at your core then as well? Are you an introvert
bipolar?
Introvert or extrovert, or are you someone who just lives in both worlds comfortably?
Yeah, both. I think what is there's a definition of an extrovert is somebody who gets their energy from other people, and an introvert is somebody who gets their energy from being
Solitude,
alone.
yeah.
Both of those things, and I can't do too much of one without doing some of the other.
I wonder if you are both. I did one of those personality tests, like a big 3-hour one at a business, and I struggle with them because they're like, do you write lists or do you go off the cuff? And I'm like, well, I do both. But he said to me, the guy at the end of it, like it's a full 3-hour massive thing. He goes, it's very obvious in the results that innately at your core you're an impromptu person, but you've taught yourself to write lists. So he was able to see in the numbers. And I wonder if you are, and I'm not challenging you here, Michelle, but if you are genuinely living in both worlds, or do you honestly feel more natural in one and you've taught yourself to, be able to get from the other?
I see what you're saying, but I'm not buying, because I look back. Oh, thank you. I look back to my childhood, and even then, I was somebody who was either wanting to be out there in the world with lots of people doing noisy, loud things, or very happy in my room alone with books and dolls and whatever. But quite often, even as a very tiny child, like primary school child, alone in my room writing a script for a monologue that I was going to then go and perform for my family. Well, yuck.
Wow. No, I mean, look, I wasn't challenging you there, Michelle, because it kind of resonates with me as well. I love doing the kind of big and brash and on stage sort of stuff as well. But if I can get a weekend in the house by myself with no one around, that really feels good as well. I like that as well.
I know.
I get it.
Yeah.
As you were coming up and coming through the stand-up sort of ranks, do you remember looking towards, I mean, you mentioned Carol Burnett, but as you're going through your kind of professional development, looking towards other comedians and kind of going, like them, like people from your past who you drifted towards, either professionally, maybe offshore, didn't have to be personally, or personally. And what about today? Do you look towards people today and go, maybe the next generation, and go, they're something special?
Yeah, yes to all of that. So I remember watching Janine Garofalo the very first time, because I started doing comedy before we had YouTube. So I used to listen to comedians on a cassette.
Yep.
A cassette, just a little plastic anyway. And so when did I first see Janine Garofalo? I don't know, probably early 2000s on a DVD, probably. And going, oh, you can do it like that. You can do it. You can do it in a flannel shirt and a t-shirt and carry a notebook and look kind of like you're not prepared for this, and then just be fabulous. And I remember working with Maria Bamford in Adelaide in the early 2000s. Do you know Maria Bamford, who's what's my favorite joke of hers?
If I was going to have plastic surgery, the part of my body I'd like to have removed is the part of my brain that gives a fuck about what other people think.
I just adored her. I wanted to be her, but I couldn't be her.
That was amazing, by the way. Thank you for sharing that. So the impressions, is this going to be a new part of the upcoming tour? Impressions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely going for accents. I'm from Dorset. It's clearly good. I'm trying to work on an impression of King Charles, but I don't think I don't know. He ends up sounding like Baby Stewie from Family Guy.
This is Prince Charles.
Yeah, it's not.
All that kind of.
It's not great. I'm going to work on it. But so those women who, and we we had so few in New Zealand. Like there was me, Justine Smith, Cal Wilson, Irene Pink. It's kind of it. And so watching women from overseas was always amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about the women coming through now. Who do I love? Courtney Dawson. I'm deeply in love with. There's a woman from Wellington called Lisa. Oh my God, Whiting. Lisa something Whiting, who's just adorable. And I can't take my eyes off her when she's on stage. Becky Umbers is adorable.
I mean, you got.
There's a whole,
but you got to say,
like a
you got to say as well. You're talking about maybe some up and comers, maybe a bit more so. But you got to say the most successful stand-up comedian in New Zealand today, New Zealander, is probably like
It's
today
Rose.
is Rose Matafoe. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I love the way that she has totally picked the ball up and run with it. I don't know her well enough to know if she has any imposter syndrome, but it fucking doesn't look like it. I just adore how she's gone. Yes, I'll go to London. Yes, I'll make a TV series. Yes, I'll make series too. I was so full of, sometimes people would offer me opportunities and I go, oh, no, that's no.
It's not
No,
me.
I do nothing. No, I'm too. And I was just terrified. So I love that Rose is not terrified. I think that's amazing.
It's so cool as well. I've never met Rose. I don't know Rose from a bar of soap, but I love things like Big Fat Quiz end of every year, and you see Rose Matafoe pop up and you're like, oh my God, you kind of feel like proud that there's a connection that she's doing all those things. It's amazing.
Yeah. Very, very cool.
Taskmaster,
That's wonderful.
UK Taskmaster, that kind of stuff. It's like, oh my God, these things are happening. It's amazing.
Yeah. I know, right? Sorry, I'm going to just divert us for 1 second, but there was a moment when I was a very young child staying with my great uncle Frank, the raconteur, and my great aunt Ruth in their house in Napier. And it was school holidays, August, and it was raining all the fucking time. And I searched through their bookcase and pulled out, for no particular reason, a book that I've never heard of by a writer called Catherine Mansfield. And there was a story called At the Bay, and it was in Wellington. Wellington was in a book.
Wow.
And a lady from New Zealand wrote a book, and it had Wellington. It was mind-blowing. I think I was, 10 or something. And I just went, oh, we can do things. I didn't know we were allowed to do things. I didn't know we were allowed to be in books. So yeah, that's how I feel when I see Rose on, Stephen Colbert or something. You go, oh look, we're allowed to be.
Yeah, it's the last time that sort of felt like it happened was probably Flight of the Conchords. And
then definitely.
Then the next iteration and the next generation. That's probably what it's supposed to be, Michelle.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you today.
I've liked it too.
Lady Michele A'Court. Is it lady? Get lady? I was thinking maybe they should be some kind of card, like 10% off at all the fast food joints or something like that should come with the New Year's honours.
I would like that.
Yeah.
I would like that. I don't know what else you get for it. I get to go to Government House soon and get my bow.
Nice.
You can get either a medal or a bow. The medal makes it look like maybe you fought in the Boer War. So I'm having the bow. It looks very Minnie Mouse.
No, I reckon the medal. Surely the medal is going to be longer lasting. Pass it on to your kids.
No, it's a big red bow with a kind of metal thing on it. So yeah,
I was about to ask you, have you put it on your email signature yet? But I could probably just go and have a look.
No, I haven't. No, that feels weird.
You should. Okay,
I haven't done it.
Rose Matafoe would have it on her email signature by now. You should put it on your email signature.
Yeah.
When I grow up, I want to be like Rose. That's what we should be doing.
It's too showy offy. I couldn't do it. Yuck.
Hey, Michelle, if people want to know more about you, what you're doing, where you're touring, what's upcoming for you, what can they
won't.
do?
Not after this. They'll be like, fuck, we know way too much about her. What is going on? Jesus, what a loud old lady. I've got a website, michelea'court.com.
Easy as. It's been lovely chatting to you.
And there's a Wikipedia page. You can find out anything about me there.
On the Wikipedia page, there'll be a link to external links, which will go to your website as well, I'm sure.
I think this is how that works. I think it is. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today, mate. It's been a blast.
Oh, it's been really lovely, Pat. You're there. That was really fun. Love it.